Finding Me by Viola Davis. Book Summary. Finding Me, a Memoir, 2022, is a New York Times best-selling book by actress Viola Davis, sharing the story of her upbringing in poverty in Rhode Island and her journey to overcome the trauma of her early life, ultimately achieving worldwide success and recognition. Davis, a highly regarded actor, has earned numerous prestigious awards throughout her career. When her memoir was released, she made history as the only African American to win the Triple Crown of acting, an Oscar, Emmy, and Tony. Through her personal narrative, Davis explores key themes such as the connection between poverty, race, and trauma, the challenging path to self-acceptance in the face of discrimination, and how factors like luck, privilege, and chance shape careers in Hollywood. Chapter 1: Running. From an early age, Viola Davis faced bullying for being black. In third grade, she would often race home after school to escape a group of boys who chased her and hurled racist insults. One day, after a snowstorm left mounds of snow everywhere, Viola couldn't take off her shoes to run because they were full of holes, and she was caught. In fear, she begged the group's leader, a Portuguese boy, to understand that they both shared the experience of being black. He angrily rejected this and, after a punch to her arm, let her go. Viola later told her mother, May Alice, whom she calls Ma Mama, about the incident. May urged her to stop running and fight back. She handed Viola a crochet needle, instructing her to stab any boy who threatened her and forbidding her from returning home upset. The next day, Viola followed her mother's advice, threatening to stab one of the boys who grabbed her, and they left her alone after that. Years later, while filming Suicide Squad, Viola had a conversation with actor Will Smith that reminded her of the pain she had carried since childhood. She realized that deep down, she was still that scared girl who ran from school every day because of the hatred aimed at her for being black. Viola had believed her entire life was a quest to heal that 8-year-old girl. However, a therapist later challenged this belief, suggesting that her younger self had been pretty tough for surviving and that perhaps it was the 53-year-old Viola who needed healing. Although Viola didn't fully embrace this idea at first, she later came to see her life's path as mirroring Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. According to Campbell, the hero must confront and integrate their opposites, embracing the parts of themselves they have previously rejected. Viola understood that her younger self was still very much present and not willing to be overlooked or diminished by her adult self. Chapter 2: My World. Viola Davis was born on August 11, 1965, at her maternal grandparents' home on the Singleton Plantation in South Carolina. She was the fifth of 6 children, and her mother, May, was the eldest of 18 siblings. May left school in 8th grade, partly due to pregnancy and partly because she was repeatedly beaten by her teacher. This abuse stemmed from the teacher's internalized colorism, as May was dark-skinned, from the rural South, and had nappy hair, traits that the teacher disliked. May went on to marry and have several children: John Henry, born when May was 15, followed by Diane, Anita, Dolores, and Viola in the next 7 years, with Danielle arriving 11 years later. The name Dolores was also given to May's sibling, who died as an infant in a house fire. At age 3, May had accidentally started the fire while playing with matches. She managed to rescue her younger brother, but could not save the baby, who died of smoke inhalation. May was blamed for the tragedy and beaten despite her young age. Despite these early hardships, May grew into a strong, assertive woman, known for her activism in the 1970s, including fighting for welfare reform, speaking at Brown University, and even being arrested. However, she did end up in an abusive marriage, having experienced sexual abuse herself. Viola's father, Dan Davis, was abusive for many years. His education stopped at 2nd grade, but he later learned to read with the help of a friend. Dan ran away from home at 15, after suffering years of abuse, and became a horse groomer. Although he worked with some of the best racehorses in the country, Dan despised his job. Viola recalls how his demeanor would change around horse owners, feeling as though he was treated as a slave by them. Dan had many talents beyond his job. He was musically inclined, enjoying soul, jazz, blues, and playing the guitar and harmonica. However, his work as a horse groomer barely paid, and his frustrations, combined with his painful past, led to alcoholism and violent rage. During Viola's childhood, Dan had numerous affairs, and despite May knowing about them, her values about marriage prevented her from leaving him. She remained deeply loyal to Dan, never engaging in extramarital relationships, though she once confessed to Viola that she had fallen in love with her obstetrician. Viola reflects that both her parents were running away from bad memories, and neither had the tools to find peace or joy. May struggled with gambling, while Dan's alcoholism and violent tendencies created a toxic environment. Despite this, Viola always felt loved by her father. She recognized that his love and his demons coexisted, and sometimes the demons won. One of Viola's most pivotal memories occurs when she is 14. During another violent fight between her parents, Dan picks up a glass and threatens to bust your head open, May Alice. He smashes the glass on May's head, causing her to bleed heavily. In that moment, Viola, holding her baby sister Danielle, finds the courage to confront her father. Despite her fear, she demands that Dan stop and hand her the glass. Dan eventually relents, walking away. This moment becomes significant in Viola's life, as it marks the beginning of her realization that she could break free from her parents' destructive patterns and live a different life. That fight marked the beginning of my shift, she reflects. Chapter 3, Central Falls. The family relocates to Central Falls, Rhode Island, a few months after Viola is born, bringing Dolores, Anita, and Viola along, while John and Diane stay with May's parents. The move is driven by Dan's job, as Rhode Island is home to two major racetracks, Lincoln Downs and Narragansett. Living in severe poverty in Central Falls, Viola and her family struggle. They rarely have access to a phone, hot water, or gas. Food stamps never go far enough. Their homes are poorly maintained, with broken plumbing and unreliable toilets, which forces the family to go without bathing for days. With no heat, they are left with only cold water and often lack basic toiletries like towels, soap, or shampoo. A kind Syrian shopkeeper named Gabe Anter helps them by extending credit when they can't afford to pay. However, May and Dan often rely on loans from Gabe, sending the children to collect the money, a situation that deeply embarrasses Viola and Dolores. Viola recalls their relationship with Gabe as being rooted in kindness and gratitude, but also shame. Nevertheless, they have little choice. When you're clutching to live, morals go out the window. One of their first apartments is at 128 Washington Street, and the number 128 becomes a shorthand for misery between Viola and her sisters. The building is unsafe, with unstable wiring and frequent fires. It is also overrun with rats, who come out at night and consume everything, even chewing on the faces of the children's dolls. The mayor, Mayor Bessette, appears generous by allowing the family to stay rent-free and even knocks down a wall to connect their apartment with the one next door, providing a bit more space. However, the building is condemned and set to be demolished within a year to make way for a new school. 2 years after their move, May becomes fed up with hearing about Diane and John's abuse at school and decides to save up and bring them to Central Falls. Diane and John finally arrive when Viola is 5 and Diane is 9. Diane is initially placed in the 4th grade, but her academic skills are so far behind that she is not allowed to stay. She convinces her teacher, Mr. Fortin, to work with her after school so she can catch up, promising to study hard and prove she belongs in her grade. Mr. Fortin agrees, and Diane keeps her word, teaching Viola and the other younger siblings everything she learns so they can be ahead in their own classes. As a result, Viola becomes restless in school, bored because she has already mastered the material being taught, thanks to Diane. Diane has a lasting impact on Viola's life. Viola recalls feeling an instant bond with her sister when they were reunited in Central Falls. Diane encourages Viola to dream of a better future and to work hard to escape the poverty they were born into. She tells Viola to decide what she wants to become and strive toward it, so she doesn't share the same fate as their parents. This conversation becomes a turning point for Viola, and the desire for success becomes her driving force. Diane becomes her supernatural ally in this journey to escape their past. Chapter 4, 128. For Viola and her sisters, school becomes a sanctuary, especially for Diane, who thrives there. One particularly harsh winter, with no heat, electricity, or gas, their water pipes freeze, leaving them without running water. They can't flush the toilet or wash themselves, which is especially difficult because they are all severe bedwetters. Initially, the children stay home from school, but eventually, Diane decides she is going. May and the others take a walk to try to warm up, and as they pass by the school, Mrs. Prosser, the principal, notices them and asks why they aren't in class. Upon learning about their situation, she is moved to tears and offers to help in any way she can. Viola looks back on this time as one filled with shame. Their apartment at 128 Washington Street only deepens this feeling. The building suffers from frequent fires. Once, when Viola is in first grade, a fire breaks out, visible from her classroom window. She feels humiliated, knowing her classmates already look down on her because she is black, and now they see her house burning. On another occasion, a fire starts during the night, and their neighbor, Millie, alerts Dan and May, urging them to evacuate the children. The family is forced to escape via the fire escape, as the stairs are filled with smoke. At the last moment, Viola freezes, but May makes an incredible leap to grab her and pull her to safety. Viola is scolded by her sisters for hesitating. Over time, the fires increase in frequency, the rats continue to infest their home, and the living conditions at 128 deteriorate further. Despite everything, Viola remains motivated by one question that Diane once asked her: "What do you want to be?" Chapter 5, Minefield. The Davis family faces increased tension with their new neighbors, the Thompsons, who have 8 children and 2 guardians. The Davises nickname the Bullfrogs because of their appearance. The Thompson children relentlessly torment Viola and her sisters. One day, after the Thompson girls physically attack Dolores, May has had enough. She confronts them, and when Lisa Thompson insults her with a racial slur, May slaps her hard, warning her to stay away from her children. The Bullfrogs decide to press charges, and Dan worries that May will face legal consequences. However, May is undeterred, insisting she will tell the truth in court. When the hearing takes place, Dan advises May to stay calm and not react, but she ignores him. When called to speak, May passionately defends herself, explaining that the Thompson children had been harassing her own, and that she slapped Lisa in response to the racial slur. Surprisingly, the judge understands May's frustration and dismisses the case. In the following weeks, verbal threats and insults continue between the two families until Dan, fed up, storms out with a baseball bat, threatening the Thompsons if the harassment doesn't stop. After this confrontation, the tension eases, and the two groups of children eventually become friends. Years later, May runs into Lisa, who apologizes for her earlier behavior and reveals that she and the other children had been kidnapped by the Bullfrogs, who were committing welfare fraud and frequently abusing the children. Viola also recalls another set of neighbors, 3 young boys named James, Bobby, and Frank, who become her best friends. Their father, Tommy, is abusive toward their mother, who has cerebral palsy. After an altercation between Tommy and Dan, when Tommy forbids his children from playing with Viola, Tommy retaliates by poisoning and killing the Davises' dog, Coley. These violent incidents, along with the continuous strain of their environment, contribute to Viola's feeling that Central Falls is both home and a minefield, where she constantly has to navigate potential dangers, both big and small, while trying to carve out a space for herself and her identity. Chapter 6, My Calling. Viola experiences a life-changing moment when she watches Cicely Tyson in the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman on TV. Viola is deeply moved by the strength and depth of Tyson's performance, which makes her realize that acting is her true calling. At that moment, I found my calling. Soon after, Viola and her sisters take part in a contest at Jenks Park, where they must perform a skit for a chance to win a prize and be featured in the local paper. Diane takes charge of the entire process, assigning each sister a different role: writing, directing, producing, and acting. The sisters decide to create an original skit inspired by Monty Hall's Let's Make a Deal. Rehearsals are rigorous and intense, with Diane pushing the others to work hard and perfect the performance. Despite Viola's overwhelming stage fright, she participates, driven by the pressure from her sisters, who threaten to flake out if she doesn't follow through. The skit earns a standing ovation and is declared the winner, leaving Viola with a powerful sense of validation. She reflects on the experience, recognizing that winning gave her an instant sense of protection and a smoke screen to hide her constant fear. Winning was an instant protection and smoke screen to hide the fact that I was simply scared all the time. This moment marks a pivotal point in Viola's journey, where the applause and recognition shield her vulnerabilities, allowing her to feel a sense of belonging and accomplishment. Chapter 7, The Sisterhood. Viola and her sisters form a close-knit platoon, united in their desire to escape their challenging family situation. Winning the skit contest marks a significant turning point for them, bringing a sense of achievement and hope. The prize, a softball bat, becomes a symbol of their success and a practical tool for survival. Anita, who later excels as a softball player, uses it to kill rats in their apartment. Though Viola's childhood has some bright moments, especially through Dan's efforts to celebrate holidays like Valentine's Day and Christmas, these moments are quickly overshadowed by trauma. Dan's alcoholism and violent behavior create a chaotic and unsafe environment, while poverty leads to extreme hunger. At the age of 9, Viola recalls dissociating from her body as a way to escape her harsh reality. She and Dolores also pretend to be rich, white Beverly Hills matrons, imagining a life of luxury with jewels and chihuahuas, a game they play when their father is drunk or fighting with May. Viola and her sisters experience varying degrees of sexual abuse. When Viola is 8, she is publicly groped by a drunk man at a friend's birthday party, leaving her feeling dirty and humiliated. Viola and her sisters are also often left with older boys as babysitters, neighbors as well as their brother John, and they are abused by all of them, including John. Years later, Viola brings this up to May, revealing that John had behaved aggressively, sexually, and inappropriately with her and her sisters, and the revelation is met with a shocked and guilty silence. Throughout Viola's childhood, she witnesses numerous dangerous and traumatic events, particularly involving physical fights between Dan and May. These altercations often result in the children being hurt as collateral damage. May suffers frequent and severe injuries, including swollen faces, split lips, and open, bleeding wounds on her head and arms. These injuries leave a trail of blood outside the apartment, adding to the constant fear and instability in their lives. Viola constantly prays for Dan not to lose control and kill May. Another traumatic incident involves Anita being chased and almost killed by a mentally ill man, a Vietnam War veteran with extreme PTSD and violent tendencies. The traumatic events in Viola and her sisters' lives leave deep emotional scars, requiring immense healing. However, they lack the knowledge or resources to understand or address the pain they've experienced. With no guidance or support, they struggle to cope with the trauma, leaving them to navigate their difficult circumstances without the tools needed for recovery. Chapter 8: Secret, Silent, Shame. School remains a crucial source of salvation for Viola and her sisters, helping them thrive academically. Both Dolores and Diane earn spots in the National Honor Society. However, Viola struggles to stay awake during class due to sleepless nights, which are disrupted by her parents' frequent arguments. She also deals with the embarrassment of being a bedwetter until the age of 14, and with no access to hot water or soap at home, she often arrives at school smelling of urine. Dolores, a passionate reader and exemplary student, comes home one day thrilled about an upcoming science test. She studies hard, aspiring to become an archaeologist. On the day of the test, Viola, who admires her teacher, is scolded for her odor, with the teacher telling her that her mother needs to wash her properly because the odor is horrible. Viola is sent to the nurse's office, where she finds Dolores, also there for the same reason. The nurse lectures them about their hygiene, after receiving complaints from several teachers, and gives them instructions on how to wash. Despite this, no one ever asks about their home life or if anything might be wrong. Mortified by the incident, Viola makes sure she's clean the next day, only for her teacher to not even notice. Years later, Dolores shares with Viola that, despite earning an A on her test, a classmate who had previously bullied her accused her of cheating. The teacher, without hesitation, changed her grade to an F. This experience drove Dolores to become a teacher herself, determined to spare other children from the same heartbreak. Viola later reflects on how being both black and poor presented immense challenges for her and her sisters, exacerbated by constant hunger, which drained their energy and made it hard to concentrate in school. The emotional toll often led Viola to lash out and get into fights. Moreover, Viola and her sisters faced overt racism at school, where they were taunted and taught false narratives, such as the idea that black people were once illiterate. Through it all, the sisters stuck together, becoming a tight-knit girl posse, fighting their way out of the isolation brought on by poverty and a world where they felt they didn't belong. Chapter 9: The Muse. Danielle, the youngest of the Davis siblings, is born when Viola is 11 years old. Having always been the baby of the family, Viola's new role as a big sister brings about a positive change in her. Viola, who has often been described as an awkward, angry, hurt, traumatized kid, finds Danielle's arrival almost like a cure, and the love she feels for Danielle becomes a daily source of joy. Due to Dan and May's constant arguments, Viola often stays home to protect Danielle. Although Viola lacks the tools to fully protect her sister and needs guidance and support herself, she does her best to care for and nurture Danielle. Between Viola's first and second years of college, she is called home after something happens to 8-year-old Danielle. Upon arriving, Viola finds May in tears, angrily shouting at a man handcuffed in the back of a police car, with Danielle sobbing in May's arms. The man, who frequently visited a corner store and attempted to molest young girls there, offered Danielle money in exchange for allowing him to touch her. Unable to understand what the men said, Danielle accepted the money. When he proceeded to touch her, she skated home, terrified. A furious May flagged down the police and identified the men. The men ends up only being fined, and Danielle receives $9 a month for the next few months as compensation for having been molested. Viola reflects on the excruciating revelation she had after the incident, realizing that, no matter how hard she tried, she wouldn't be able to protect her little sister from all the pain life would bring. Danielle struggled to heal from the trauma of that experience, and even more than 40 years later, she is still in the process of coping with it. Chapter 10: The Starting Block. At 14, Viola participates in Upward Bound, a federally funded program that offers her the opportunity to take college-level classes for 6 weeks during the summer. The group she joins consists of college-bound teenagers from various challenging backgrounds, such as language barriers, family conflicts, and experiences of political abuse or genocide in their home countries. The students come from diverse racial backgrounds, all sharing a common experience of extreme poverty, yet united by a strong desire for education and high achievement. Most of them are the first in their families to pursue higher education. For the first time in her life, Viola feels that her own struggles and family issues are minor compared to those of others, and she finds comfort in this realization. Viola joins a drama program as an extracurricular activity in the evenings, where Ron Stetson serves as her acting coach. Ron is a cool, young man with unconventional views on the world, people, and race, and he isn't afraid to speak his mind. During the very first class, Ron asks the group how many of them aspire to be actors, emphasizing the difficulty of the profession and the need for constant hard work and dedication. At first, every student raises their hand, but as Ron goes on to describe the inevitable rejections and challenges that come with the profession, Viola is the only one left with her hand raised. This moment solidifies her belief that acting is her true calling. Ron has a profoundly positive effect on Viola's self-esteem. One day, he overhears a conversation between Viola and Dolores in which they describe themselves as not being pretty. Ron immediately intervenes, telling them that they are both beautiful and that he has always thought so. This affirmation is the first time Viola experiences such appreciation for her appearance, and it validates her sense of femininity. Beyond that, Ron creates a safe space for Viola and her fellow students, allowing them to share their secrets without fear of judgment. He encourages them to express themselves boldly and appreciates their efforts to do something unique. Through her time in the program, Viola learns the importance of opening your mouth and owning your friggin' story. Chapter 11: Being Seen. Just before Viola's senior year of high school, Mr. Isis, her 9th grade science teacher and the musical director at her school, hands her a pamphlet about the arts recognition and talent search. This national competition spans 5 disciplines in visual and performing arts, with 30 students chosen from each category for an all-expenses-paid trip to Miami for the event. Winners receive scholarship money. Mr. Isis encourages Viola to enter the competition for drama, telling her that as soon as he saw the pamphlet, she immediately came to mind. Viola shares her doubts about entering the competition with her Upward Bound counselor, Jeff Kenyon. Jeff helps her secure a VHS tape for her drama audition, waives the application fee, and arranges a place for her to record her monologues, pushing her past her excuses and encouraging her to apply. One day, while walking home from school, Viola is surprised to see May running toward her, holding her acceptance letter into the competition. Viola travels to Miami the summer before her 12th grade year. Although she feels out of place in many ways, she performs exceptionally well, particularly with her prepared monologues. Her talent begins to gain recognition, and although she doesn't win any scholarship money, she is named a promising young artist, and is honored at a city hall ceremony back home. However, despite these achievements, Viola struggles with feelings of unworthiness, reflecting, "My talents and the recognition that came with it were far more evolved than me, Viola." Chapter 12: Taking Flight. Viola is accepted into Rhode Island College with a scholarship from the Preparatory Enrollment Program, a sister program to Upward Bound. Despite her lifelong passion for acting, she worries about securing a steady income and decides to take several English courses, hoping to become a teacher. However, this decision leads to deep depression, as she feels she is trading in her dream. Viola's college experience is further complicated by ongoing challenges from her home life. One night, a heavily pregnant Anita arrives at Viola's dorm with a bloodied May and urine-soaked Danielle after yet another violent episode with Dan. May, seeking safety, has fled the house with Danielle, and Anita brings them to Viola. Despite having few resources of her own, Viola takes Danielle in for the night. Danielle eventually returns home but calls Viola multiple times over the next week, begging her to take her away from the chaos. Throughout her college years, Viola faces tremendous pressure to achieve at the highest level. Part of this pressure comes from Diane, who instills in her younger siblings the belief that not only would they go to college, but they would also succeed. Viola's drive to escape her parents' difficult circumstances fuels the fear that if she isn't excellent, she will fail and fall back into poverty. This black and white thinking between excellence and failure adds to her stress. With constant encouragement from Dolores, Viola finally changes her major to theater, deciding to pursue her dream of becoming an actor. Much of her depression lifts, and she realizes that the cure was finding the courage to dare, risking failure. Viola's college experience is a mix of highs and lows. She makes many friends and becomes especially close to her studmates. However, she often feels like she doesn't fully belong with either the white students or the black students. She is too dark-skinned to fit in with the former but lacks the cultural and social behaviors to fit in with the latter, having grown up in a predominantly white neighborhood. Throughout her college years, she works numerous jobs to afford basic necessities like food, feeling as though she's constantly on a treadmill, balancing work, studies, and the pursuit of a degree. Despite these challenges, Viola excels in her acting classes, auditioning for and winning roles in two main stage productions, Hot L Baltimore and Romeo and Juliet. She is even nominated for the Irene Ryan Award for her performance in the former. For her senior thesis, Viola creates a one-woman show featuring 17 different characters, showcasing her impressive range. Her confidence grows further when she participates in a national student exchange to California Polytechnic University in Pomona. There, she thrives academically, makes lasting friendships, and flourishes in that one semester. She returns home revitalized for her final semester, where she finishes strong, earning a spot on the dean's list for the fourth time. Viola graduates in 1988 with a degree in theater, and her entire family attends the graduation ceremony, including her maternal grandmother. When Viola receives her diploma, the applause is deafening, with her grandmother especially proud and expressing her deep admiration for her granddaughter's achievement. Chapter 13, The Blooming. After auditions, Viola joins a 6-week summer program at Circle in the Square in New York City. She receives a $1,200 grant and works in factories and telemarketing to cover the remaining costs of the program and her housing. At Circle in the Square, Viola thrives, stepping out of her comfort zone in New York. She receives some of the best acting training of her life from various instructors, though she considers Alan Langdon the best among them. Alan is not the typical flamboyant theater type but instead practices a quiet, intense observation. Viola befriends Emily, a shy, soft-spoken participant who explains that she's not there to pursue acting but to heal from past trauma. During a session with Alan, Emily is asked to perform a scene in which her character is yelled at and pinned to a wall. Instead of responding angrily, Emily whispers her lines. Alan asks her who took her voice, prompting Emily to emotionally confess that, as a child, her father would hold her down, beat, and assault her, muffling her cries. Her revelation is met with shock and empathy. She volunteers to perform the scene again, this time with a raw, guttural scream. The group is left shaken, and Alan comforts Emily afterward. Viola reflects on how great theater teachers insist that one's life experiences should be channeled into their performances, and Emily's scene serves as a prime example. Viola realizes that acting is not about perfecting superficial traits but about embodying a whole new person. After the program ends, Viola is the only student invited to join the theater group, but she declines, wanting to find a program that will ensure her a steady job afterward. She discovers that only Juilliard, Yale, NYU, and SUNY Purchase have auditions during their final year. With limited funds, she applies to Juilliard. Missing the application deadline, she decides to take a gap year to grow and experience life. She prays for 3 things: to become worthy of being a professional actress, to travel abroad, and to finally have a boyfriend, as she had not dated or had any romantic experiences during college. Viola achieves her dream of becoming a professional actress when she is cast in August Wilson's, Joe Turner's Come and Gone. During her gap year, she acts at Trinity Rep under director Adrian Hall. Performances are at night, leaving her days free to continue working. During this time, 2 significant things happen. She begins dating David, her first boyfriend, and auditions for Juilliard. David is an older, professional actor from Boston who is also part of the play. Being with him helps Viola embrace her Black identity, as David is deeply engaged with Black history, culture, and consciousness. Viola falls in love with him, but later realizes that David never truly loved her. He continues relationships with others while they're together, though she only finds this out later. David never shows affection, forgets her birthday, and never makes an effort to celebrate holidays with her. Viola admits her role in this by not setting clear boundaries or expectations. Viola travels to Juilliard for her audition on a day when she has a performance that evening. Unaware that auditions usually take place over several days, she schedules only 45 minutes for her audition. Confident in her talent after her theater experiences, she performs 2 monologues. Afterward, she approaches the staff, requesting to know if she's been accepted, as she needs to return for her performance. Surprised by her boldness, they agree to fast-track her audition. She performs in front of the entire faculty, and her interviews follow immediately. Despite rushing back for her show, Viola feels confident that she has been accepted. At the end of her gap year, Viola resigns from Trinity Rep and heads to Scotland to perform at the Fringe Festival. She has a wonderful time and feels a sense of belonging. Afterward, she returns to San Diego to spend a week with David before traveling to LA and New York for her first day at Juilliard. Upon arriving at her new apartment, which she hasn't seen before, she has a traumatic flashback from her childhood. Despite feeling depressed about her new living situation, she continues with her plans, heading to Juilliard for orientation. Chapter 14, Coming Into Me. In an effort to save money while living in New York, Viola rents a cheap, rent-stabilized apartment from Susan Lawson, the new creative director at Trinity Rep, without seeing the place beforehand. She trusts the apartment based on Susan's reputable background, an avant-garde director and the new artistic leader at Trinity Rep, who would later head Columbia University's theater program. However, upon opening the door for the first time, Viola finds the apartment to be tiny, dilapidated, and infested with mice. Viola calls Susan, who denies ever having had mice there, but Viola decides not to stay beyond her first year. Despite enjoying the city's pace, she yearns for a home that offers refuge from the harshness of New York. Viola begins her studies at Juilliard alongside 18 other students, but by the end of the first year, only 14 remain. The program is grueling, focusing not only on what students excel at but also on their weaknesses. Viola and her peers receive intense training in speech, voice, technique, movement, and scene study. They are consistently pushed outside their comfort zones, often taking roles that challenge their natural strengths. Viola finds the most difficult aspect of the program is its focus on shaping students into the ideal white actor, with little regard for other experiences or perspectives. Out of 856 students, only 30 are black, including Viola. These students form the Black Caucus and host their own celebrations for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, putting on a variety show that features genres such as jazz, gospel, modern dance, and ethnically derived material that Juilliard otherwise neglects. Viola's time at Juilliard deepens her understanding of the power of her blackness. She evolves from defending it in childhood to proving its worth in college, ultimately becoming frustrated by how blackness is regarded at Juilliard. In her second year, Juilliard offers a $2,500 scholarship for students seeking a summer program that will help them grow as artists. For the application, Viola writes a 5-page essay critiquing the burden and myopic scope of Eurocentric training. She receives the scholarship and decides to travel to the Gambia in West Africa with her friend Chris World, a dancer who spends every summer in Africa with Chuck Davis, an African dance choreographer. The group, mostly non-actors, will study the traditions of the Wolof, Jola, Mandinka, and Soso tribes. Viola is deeply moved by Africa, experiencing what she calls a cataclysmic change in her life. Each morning, the group gathers at the beach, where Chuck teaches them about African culture and they learn traditional dances. Everywhere they go, they are greeted warmly by locals. The group learns songs from the tribes they encounter and witnesses performances of traditional dances. One song that the Mandinka women dance to has lyrics that translate to "I did not come here for food. My stomach is full. I did not come here for food. I came for much more than that." Viola recalls singing it repeatedly, feeling as though it became a prayer, a cry for something deeper. The traditional dances and music help Viola realize that Juilliard's academic approach does not allow students to connect their work to their personal loves, especially for someone like her with a unique racial, ethnic, and cultural background. Juilliard's methods overlook the healing power inherent in art. After returning from the Gambia, Viola is fundamentally changed. She recognizes that her training at Juilliard has been geared towards erasing her blackness and fitting into a mold that prioritizes technique over personal expression. She feels alienated by a system rooted in white superiority, which overlooks other forms of classical art and literature. Freeing herself from this burden, Viola begins to perform with newfound confidence. A few years later, while still at Juilliard, she is approached by Mark Schlegel, an agent from the prestigious J. Michael Bloom agency, which represents top actors like Tom Hanks, Alec Baldwin, and Sigourney Weaver. Viola signs with the agency before even graduating, relieving her of the stress of auditions during her final year. Though she is advised that waiting would have given her more options, Viola is content with her choice. She values working with an agent who truly sees and understands her, rather than just any agent. Viola feels ready for life after Juilliard, until one morning she wakes up feeling unwell. Chapter 15: The Wake Up. 2 weeks before her graduation from Juilliard, Viola discovers that she is pregnant, and the baby is David's. She decides to have an abortion, as David is not there to support her during this time. David disapproves of her decision, but Viola knows that he would not have been there for her if she had chosen to keep the child. She recognizes that she had no financial or emotional resources to raise a child on her own. This experience leads her to realize that there is absolutely no way whatsoever to get through this life without scars. After graduation, despite having secured a good agent, Viola struggles to find work. She attends audition after audition, but nothing seems to come through. She has two important realizations during this period. The first is about privilege and choice. Those actors who advise waiting for the perfect role and not settling are often already privileged. They can afford to turn down roles because they have safety nets. Viola, however, is simply trying to survive. Meanwhile, her health deteriorates due to conditions like fibroids, anemia, and alopecia, and she struggles to afford basic health insurance. Her second realization concerns the dual impact of colorism and sexism in the industry. She is only offered roles that stereotype black women, such as drug-addicted mothers, and even in black rom-coms, producers are more likely to cast lighter-skinned women in leading roles. Viola reflects on how privilege shapes the opportunities actors have, recognizing that the majority of aspiring actors do not succeed due to a lack of luck, connections, or timing, not because of a lack of talent or hard work. Viola eventually gets a call to audition for a role in August Wilson's Seven Guitars, to be directed by Lloyd Richards and showcased on Broadway. She desperately wants the role and performs off-book for the audition. When she gets the call that she is cast, she is overjoyed. The production becomes a long journey, touring across the country before reaching Broadway. When the show arrives in Los Angeles, celebrities like Halle Berry and Angela Bassett attend. Being on Broadway fulfills Viola's dream, and her parents come to see the show, leaving emotional and proud after her performance. Viola's agent tells her that her parents are exceptional, as they are not like typical stage parents, they just want to see her succeed and be happy. This moment shifts Viola's perception of her parents, and she sees them in a new, loving light. The success of Seven Guitars is a major turning point in Viola's career, earning her first Tony nomination. She also receives other prestigious nominations, including from the Outer Critics Circle Awards, Drama Desk, Drama League, and Theatre World Awards for Outstanding Broadway Debut, which she wins. While Viola experiences professional success, personal challenges persist. Her sister Danielle has a baby at 17 despite her family's attempts to keep her out of trouble. Her brother John also has children, one of whom is born with severe withdrawal symptoms due to the mother's cocaine use during pregnancy. Dan, Viola's father, changes after becoming a grandfather. Though his drinking continues, his violent rages stop. Dan and May gain custody of John's children, and Dan focuses on raising them while helping May as best he can. Viola provides financial support, but her family's growing needs stretch her resources. She wonders when she will be able to fully enjoy her own life. Viola lands a role in Steven Soderbergh's Out of Sight, a small part as Don Cheadle's character's girlfriend. While the role is minor, it pays more than her theater work, and she is excited to earn the money. This leads to more roles, including in the HBO film The Pentagon Wars. Viola finally earns enough to afford health insurance and begins therapy. She also has her fibroids removed, but the procedure leaves her with a narrow window to conceive before she becomes infertile, though she has no significant partner at the time. While working on A Raisin in the Sun, a castmate named Joseph Edward asks Viola why she does not have a partner. Viola admits that she does not know. Joseph advises her to pray and present God with a list of what she wants in a partner. Viola follows his advice, praying for a big, black man who was an ex-athlete, preferably a football player, someone who is real country, has had a wife before me and children already, believes in God, and is emotionally available and understands what I do as an actor. Despite her ongoing work, including moving to Los Angeles to film City of Angels, Viola feels exhausted. She now longs to find a home, a place that is peaceful, nurturing, reliable, and filled with love. Chapter 16, Harnessing Bliss. A few weeks after Viola prays for a specific kind of partner, she moves to Los Angeles and meets Julius Tenen, an actor and fellow castmate on City of Angels. He offers to take her to see the Santa Monica Pier and gives her his card. Viola later learns that Julius is from Texas, used to play football, and has 2 children and a grandchild from a previous marriage. 6 weeks later, at the urging of her therapist, Viola finally calls Julius and goes on her first date with him. From that moment, her life begins to improve. Julius checks off every item on her wish list, even inviting her to join him at church. Viola and Julius quickly connect and fall in love. Not long after they begin dating, Viola receives an opportunity to play a small role in August Wilson's King Hedley 2. Though initially reluctant, Julius encourages her to take the role, as she doesn't have any other projects lined up. Viola's performance as Tanya wins her a Tony Award. Viola views this period as her growing up. She moves in with Julius, fixes up and sublets her apartment in Harlem, pays off her student loans, buys her first condo with Julius, and they marry there in 2003. They have multiple ceremonies and celebrations, as Viola wants to give her family the experience of a wedding, something no one in her family has had before. Their partnership flourishes in both personal and professional aspects, and together they start a production company, Juvie Productions. Viola's relationship with her father, Dan, also heals over time. His transformation after becoming a grandfather is profound. With young children depending on him, Dan works through his anger and inner pain. He and May take in 5 of Viola's siblings' children, with another 3 constantly coming and going. The responsibility of raising so many children brings a sense of purpose and joy to Dan and May, and their frequent fighting stops. Dan's abusive behavior towards May ceases, and when May develops hip problems and sciatic nerve pain, Dan takes on the role of caregiver. As Viola's career continues to grow, she does everything she can to support her parents, bringing them to New York to spend time with her and appreciating her parents at this stage in their lives. Despite Viola's increasing success, her family faces continued challenges. Sometimes as many as 15 people are living in Dan and May's apartment. During filming for The Andromeda Strain, Viola receives a call from her sister informing her that Dwight Pomisciano, the father of Danielle's children, has passed away at 28. Viola also continues to experience health struggles, including heavy bleeding despite having fibroids removed years prior. These physical challenges coincide with her growing desire for a child of her own, leading to her yearning for motherhood. While shooting life is not a fairy tale, Viola learns that her father, Dan, has had a massive heart attack. After undergoing quadruple bypass surgery, Dan is overjoyed to be alive, but scans reveal lesions on his liver, indicating cancer. Dan is diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that has metastasized to his liver, lungs, and kidneys. Unable to move Dan out of the crowded apartment, Viola and her siblings try to make him as comfortable as possible. Despite their efforts, the apartment's constant traffic causes the best furniture and equipment to break. Facing his mortality, Dan apologizes to May for all the hurt he caused over the years. After 48 years of marriage, they find peace before his death. Dan refuses to go into hospice or a hospital, wanting to be cared for at home, but his condition deteriorates to the point where hospice care becomes inevitable. May reluctantly agrees, and Dan passes away less than half an hour after entering hospice care. Viola reflects on how much of her heart went with him, feeling a deep loss that will never be filled. Dan's funeral is well attended, revealing how many people's lives he touched over the years. Viola is moved by the number of people who show up to honor her father. His passing leaves a void in her heart, and she acknowledges that a part of her heart went with him, never to return. Chapter 17, There She Is. Viola's career takes a significant turn when she lands a role in the movie Doubt, marking her transition from the stage to Hollywood. She works alongside renowned actors Meryl Streep, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Amy Adams, describing them as one of the greatest casts she ever worked with for their down-to-earth attitude and dedication to the craft. Just before the film's release in 2008, Viola is recognized as one of the 10 most promising artists to watch at the Hollywood Film Festival. However, the night before the event, she experiences severe cramps, and Julius rushes her to the emergency room. Viola is diagnosed with an abscessed fallopian tube, requiring urgent surgery. Fed up with her ongoing reproductive health issues, she decides to undergo a partial hysterectomy during the procedure, missing the prestigious event. Despite this, doubt brings Viola her first Oscar nomination, marking a milestone in her career and making her feel like she has become a success. 2 years later, Viola adopts her daughter Genesis, a decision she describes as one of the most rewarding experiences of her life, despite the lengthy and challenging adoption process. The joy of motherhood becomes an important part of her journey. While working on August Wilson's Fences, Viola auditions for the role in The Help. Although she has reservations about the film, feeling that there is a disconnect between how black and white audiences perceive it, she ultimately agrees to take the role due to the strong cast and respected directors. She bonds deeply with her co-stars, including Emma Stone, Octavia Spencer, and Jessica Chastain. However, Viola reflects on how the country and culture were not yet ready for the story, particularly because of how black narratives were either misrepresented or underrepresented. The film also faced criticism for its portrayal of a white savior narrative. Viola acknowledges that the criticism is more about unconscious bias and microaggressions than the people involved, noting that she personally had a great experience working on the film. Despite its mixed reception, she earns an Oscar nomination for her role as Aibileen, competing against Meryl Streep, her personal idol, for the Best Actress Oscar. Despite receiving multiple Oscar nominations, Viola continues to struggle with the types of roles she is offered. It's only when she teams up with Shonda Rhimes as Shondaland that she lands a role that truly transforms her career. Cast as Annalise Keating in How to Get Away with Murder, Viola takes on a complex character, a sexual, smart, vulnerable, and highly astute criminal defense attorney. Initially met with skepticism by some, who questioned whether Viola could convincingly play such a role, she eventually embraces the character, overcoming her self-doubt and insecurities. Annalise's role helps Viola redefine the world's view of black women in mainstream media. Viola becomes the first person of color to win a Primetime Emmy for lead actress in a drama series, a monumental achievement in her career. The confidence and self-discovery Viola gains from her role in How to Get Away with Murder also fuel her performance in the film adaptation of Fences. Now a mother, Viola taps into her full emotional depth and delivers her best work in the film. Her experience culminates in her winning an Oscar for the role, and she reflects on how every painful memory from her past has contributed to her growth as an actor and as a person. Viola now holds herself in compassion, no longer ashamed of her past. She reconciles with her 8-year-old self, saying, "I'm holding her now. My 8-year-old self. She is squealing and reminding me, don't worry. I'm here to beat anybody's ass who messes with our joy. Viola, I got this." This moment symbolizes the transformation she has undergone, finally accepting and embracing her true self, both in her career and in her personal life.